Did you have an imaginary friend growing up? Someone you would talk to, confide in, share stories with? Sometimes children make up elaborate backgrounds for their imaginary friends, with some believing with all their heart that their friend is real. What if that strong belief system actually brought their imaginary friend to life as a living, breathing entity? Sounds kind of terrifying, right? Now apply this same line of thinking to the spirit world. Is your home really haunted, or is it all made up? In 1972, the Toronto Parapsychological Research Society set out to test this theory, and their results were surprising. The spirit world has enticed the living for as long as humans have roamed the earth. Many beliefs are deeply rooted in religious practices where the afterlife isn't just an idea, it's a certainty. The first fictionalized conversation with the spirit world appears in Dialogues of the Dead by George First Baron Lyttelton, which was published in England in 1760. But 100 years earlier, in 1660, the Royal Society was founded. The Fellows of the Society demonstrated a keen interest in psychical research and investigation. One of the Fellows, Joseph Glanville, completely believed in the notion that spirits exist and interact with the material world. Although much of the Society's evidence would face critical skepticism, Glanville continued to defend the need to judge evidence without any bias. The popularity of spiritualism hit its fever pitch in the mid-19th century. In 1848, the Fox family of New York claimed to receive messages from a spirit in the form of knocking. A code was developed to interpret the messages and to reply in the form of yes or no. Through this communication, it was established that a peddler had been murdered and buried in the basement of the Fox family home. This peddler had returned in spirit form to try and communicate with the Fox family. Of course, a later admittance from the Fox sisters was that they had produced the sounds. However, the popularity of spiritualism grew as people continued to try and communicate with the dead. Blurring the lines of religion, spirituality, and the occult, seances became the choice method for spiritualists at the time. Seance is a French word which loosely translates to session. In English, it directly relates to the meeting of people gathering to receive messages from beyond. Believers and non-believers alike participated in these seances. The popularity had even reached the White House as Mary Todd Lincoln, who was grieving the loss of her son, organized spiritualist seances, which her husband, Old Honest Abe, attended along with other prominent members of society. Unfortunately, the practice became marred in controversy, as many fake mediums would stage the seances using fancy tricks to move objects, make lights flicker, have disembodied voices, and even plant actors in the group who would act possessed by the spirit and would exude a viscous substance known as ectoplasm. These false spiritualists led to many organizations being created dedicated to fact-finding and scientific research in the parapsychological world. One of the most notable, and the first to officially examine paranormal phenomena, was formed in 1882 by Edmund Dawson Rogers and Sir William Barrett from London. The Society for Psychical Research was made up of scientists, skeptics, spiritualists, and believers, and included prominent men such as Carl Jung, Lewis Carroll, Sigmund Freud, and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. In 1920, a well-known ghost investigator by the name of Harry Price joined SPR. Although famous for his research and paranormal investigations, his publicity would come from exposing mediums who were fraudulent. Price invented the telekinestoscope, which was used to assess mediums. He also developed a photography method using infrared film and adapted cameras to photograph the phenomena. In 1922, Price exposed the spirit photographer William Hope as a fraud. Price did this by marking Hope's photographic plates secretly with a brand image of the Imperial Dry Plate Company. Hope continued to produce images of spirits, but shockingly, they didn't contain the logo, proving that Hope had exchanged the materials prepared for the experiment with other plates. However, Price's work in the society ended up working against him following the creation of a pamphlet called Cold Light on Spiritualistic Phenomena, an experiment with the Crew Circle. A rebellion led by Arthur Conan Doyle along with 84 members led to their resignation and accusation of the society being against spiritualists, with Price at the center. In America, the popularity of seances continued to grow. One such American is believed to have held a seance in her home every night until her death. Sarah Winchester, wife of Winchester Rifles founder William Winchester, moved to California following her husband's untimely death, and in 1886 purchased La Londa Villa, now known as the Winchester Mystery House. It's said that for 38 years, until the time of her death in 1922, the construction on the home continued 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The expanding labyrinth was designed in a way to ward off and confuse evil spirits. Spirits said to be killed by Winchester rifles. The seance room was actually the gardener's bedroom. Sarah claimed this room for her nightly seances. In these seances, it's speculated that Sarah was seeking guidance from her late husband William to evade the evil spirits. Although these seances were a solo affair, many of the staff and construction team claimed to hear multiple voices coming from the seance room. By the mid-20th century, the popularity of seances began to dwindle. However, the belief in ghosts and the afterlife remained. A renewed interest grew among young people, who had now gravitated to the Ouija board. Although popularized in 1886, the origin of the talking board actually dates back to 1100 AD in China. In 1890, the talking board got its name Ouija, believed to be a word spelled out on the board when medium Helen Peters Noseworthy asked the board to name itself. Teenagers instantly attached themselves to the boards, now marketed as family entertainment and popularized in pop culture, in TV and film, from Lost in Space to The Exorcist. A revival of the occult was brewing and would lead to popular paranormal investigators of the time pointing the finger at youth using the toy to summon evil spirits and demons. By the 1970s, a theory among parapsychologists began to emerge. This theory would rock the spirit world if proven true. And in 1972, the Toronto Society for Psychical Research set out to test this idea. The theory popularized by many paranormal researchers was that some paranormal phenomena, such as hauntings, poltergeists, and even demonic activity, are actually products of the human mind. Under the guidance of Canadian Dr. A.R.G Owen, a group of 8 people from the TSPR were assembled, all of which claimed to not have any psychic gifts. They were tasked with testing Dr. Owen's theory that ghosts have an objective reality, but they are created out of the minds of those who see them. As the test group, they created a fictional historical character that would be loosely associated to historical events and figures. The fictionalized person became known as Philip Aylesford, an aristocratic Englishman who lived in the mid-1600s at the time of Oliver Cromwell. He was a supporter of the king and a staunch Catholic. Philip was married to a beautiful woman named Dorothea, who unfortunately for Philip was described as cold and frigid. One day, while riding his horse around the boundary of his estate, Philip came across a gypsy encampment. There, he saw a beautiful, dark-eyed and raven-haired gypsy girl named Margo. He fell in love instantly. In secret, he brought her back to his gatehouse near the stables of Diddington Manor, the home where he and his family lived. The love affair was kept secret for as long as possible, but eventually Dorothea became suspicious and discovered Margo living in the stables. She accused Margo of witchcraft, leading to the seduction of her husband. Out of fear of losing his reputation and possessions, Philip made no attempt to protest the trial of Margo, who was convicted of witchcraft and burned at the stake. Philip was instantly stricken with remorse, and he fell into a deep depression, spending his days pacing the battlements of Diddington in despair. In 1654, at the young age of 30, Philip was found in the battlements, where he had cast himself down, taking his own life. A tragic ending to a beautiful love affair, but the perfect recipe for a discontented spirit with unfinished business. The Owen group, as they called themselves, gathered for the first time in September of 1972. The first sitting would consist of discussing Philip and his life, meditating on him and trying to visualize the collective hallucination in more detail.
Come on, let's get going.
Have you brought Dorothea with you?
Have you seen Dorothea lately? No. No. Would you like to see Dorothea lately? No. No. Didn't you love Dorothea in your time?
But after a year, the group produced no results. However, some members claimed to occasionally feel the presence in the room, but with no communication or proof, they were unable to claim that the presence was Philip. In 1973, the group transitioned their tactics to a traditional spiritual seance. The room's lights were dimmed as the group sat around the table, singing songs and surrounding themselves with castles they imagined Philip would have lived in, along with trigger objects from the time period. And it was through this, you could say, Philip was born. Subtle at first, with a rapping on the table, later becoming a 1 for yes, 2 for no response to questions asked by the group.
That was 2. Yes, we need them louder. Philip, come on, do it loud. Philip, did you like Dorothea? That's good. Did you love Margo? Margo.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Say it again. Did you love Margo? Good. Come on.
At this point, a scientific response would be to establish the source of the tapping, trying to dispel any paranormal association. A paranormal investigator's response would be to establish whether the spiritual communication was indeed Philip or perhaps a different spirit in an attempt to trick the group. However, with one simple question, is this Philip? The group was convinced. From here, Philip's power and ability seemed to grow quickly, spanning a range of phenomena that couldn't be explained scientifically. Continuing with tap once for yes and twice for no, the group was able to get more detail on Philip's life, and through this, Philip developed a personality by conveying his likes and dislikes, with enthusiasm of Knox being associated to his viewpoint on various topics. Now, Philip's spiritual energy was able to move the table, sliding side to side, despite the fact that the floor was heavily carpeted, the group claiming that the table would even dance on one leg. Taking a look back at historical studies, Michael Faraday, an English scientist who contributed to the study of electromagnetism and electrochemistry, first described this effect in 1853 as ideomotor response while he was investigating table turning. This concept later was applied to the Ouija board, which in laboratory conditions demonstrated that subjects were moving the planchette involuntarily. In 2003, Professor of Neurology Terence Hines took this concept one step further in his book Pseudoscience and the Paranormal, describing the planchette or any moved object as being guided by unconscious muscular exertions, stating that the illusion that the object is moving under its own control is so powerful and sufficient it convinces many people that spirits are truly at work. Was ideomotor response affecting the Owen group to the point of belief that their imaginary concept was real? It would seem that the limitations of Philip's power would fuel skeptics' criticisms of the experiment. Although Philip could accurately answer questions about events and people of this time period, his responses were not information unfamiliar to the group. This further fueled the notion that the responses were associated with the group's subconscious, although some members claimed to have heard whispered responses to their questions. no EVPs were captured on tape. But if the tapping response is cast doubt, Philip's psychokinetic powers would reignite belief. When asked to dim the lights, Philip would respond in kind. Group members who now made the table the central focus of the seances would describe the table as feeling different when Philip was present, almost electric or alive. Across the table, a cool breeze would blow, and on command, Philip would stop or start again, even producing a fine mist in the middle of the table. In an even more astonishing display, the group claimed that the table would become quite animated, rushing to greet latecomers, or trapping members in the corner. Surely these physical responses would dispel the concept of ideomotor response. After nearly 2 years of experimenting, the group decided to call a recess. During this time, group members allegedly experienced poltergeist phenomena in their own homes. This continued until the group reconvened to continue the experiment. As a culmination of their years of experimentation, the final test would be a seance conducted before a live audience of 50 people. A part of the event, CBC filmed for a documentary called Philip the Imaginary Ghost. Thankfully, for the Owen group, Philip wasn't camera shy and performed his duties beyond the group's expectation. Table rappings and other noises manifested around the room while lights blinked on and off. Miraculously, the group attained a full table levitation as it rose nearly half an inch above the floor. Although the levitation was observed by those in the room and the film crew, the dim lighting prevented it from being captured on film. What started as a hypothesis evolved into physical evidence with multiple witnesses. Did the group conjure an imaginary spirit named Philip, or was it a collective subconscious manifestation? Was the experiment a success? Many would say yes. However, one major component of the experiment was to have a physical manifestation of Philip, which sadly never happened. The science was fast and loose in respect to the tests. Many criticized it for lacking solid controls and providing ambiguous results, mostly in part to the unreliability of seances. But the Owen group was convinced that Philip was no longer imaginary, and indeed had made himself known. If the noises and tapping weren't the solid proof they wanted, surely the physical responses such as the table levitating helped prove their beliefs. In the court of public opinion, the Philip experiment was quite successful, urging the Toronto Society for Psychical Research to try it again. This time with a completely different group of people and a new fictional character, Lilith. The group learned a lot through the years they spent with Philip, and it proved to yield quicker results on the new Lilith experiment. Lilith was a French-Canadian spy who, instead of taking years to manifest, took only 5 weeks. Experiments that followed was a man from the future named Axel and a medieval alchemist named Sebastian. Across the world in Sydney, Australia, a group led by veteran paranormal researcher Michael Williams set to work with their fictionalized character named Skippy Cartman, a 14-year-old girl who had been murdered by an older man. According to the story, Skippy had been having an affair with her Catholic school teacher, Brother Monk. When Skippy became pregnant, she went to Brother Monk for direction and advice. For fear of being discovered by the church, Brother Monk murdered Skippy by strangling her and burying her in the shallow grave beneath the floorboards of a work shed on her parents' property. The gruesome tale would be tested once a week for 5 months with no success. Frustrated, the group changed to a light 3-leg card table, instantly yielding results in the form of a tapping noise within the table. Within 15 minutes of their next sitting, the table began to move on its own accord. In no time, it was spinning around, balanced on one leg, dragging participants behind it. Sadly, no video or audio evidence of the Skippy experiment has ever been shared, leaving many to believe that the fantastical claims were just an effort to copycat the Philip experiment. So where does all this leave us? Are ghosts just figments of our imagination, brought forth from our subconscious to trick us into believing something paranormal is occurring? Or in the case of the Philip experiment, was the story and character imaginary, but the phenomena real, executed by a spirit pretending to be Philip? It's hard to say with certainty, one way or the other. As someone who's experienced paranormal activity personally, I can claim it was as real as this camera in my face. But to a skeptic, it could be my imagination running rampant. It does seem, however, in recent years that the idea of collective consciousness has become more prevalent. This is demonstrated through groupthink, herd behavior, collectively shared experiences that are either religious or spiritual in nature, even the sharing of popular memes. In 2009, the internet was taken by storm by Slenderman, an abnormally tall humanoid figure with no discernible features, who seemed predominantly focused on the abduction and murder of children. The story, published on Creepypasta by Eric Knudsen under the alias of Victor Surge, brought forth the mythos of the character. Soon, Slenderman was everywhere. Doctored photos online, adaptations of the original story, and even video games and movies. However, many accounts of Slenderman sightings began to surface in the months that followed. People claiming that the made-up character was actually real, and was even more terrifying in real life. Slenderman was often seen peering through windows, especially on the second floor of homes, where a normal human couldn't reach without a ladder, as well as multiple drivers reporting seeing a Slenderman figure standing on deserted roads awaiting oncoming cars. Slenderman occupies a weird territory in the paranormal world, part fictional character and part cryptid, who, by similarities to the Philip experiment, has become real thanks to collective consciousness. I want to hear what you think. Do you feel that the Philip experiment was sufficient enough evidence to prove that a fictional character can be brought to life with enough collective focus? Does collective consciousness manifest paranormal activity and bring something that isn't real into reality? Or, at the heart of it all, is this all the workings of spiritual forces all around us, playing into our deepest desires?